Welcome to a community built of tomorrow's business leaders. Hey guys, I'm William Freitas, and this is the Socius podcast. Susie Campbell, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will. Thanks for
So
having
good
me.
to have you here. Now, I can always provide a fabulous introduction for you, but I think it's always best to have an introduction from yourself because no one speaks better about you and your business than you do. So if you don't mind to start, let us know who you are and what you do. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Susie Campbell. I am a publicist and content marketer. So that basically means I help businesses and individual experts to reach the media. And I focus on traditional media, so things like radio, TV, print and digital podcasts, and help them to tell their story and share their brand wider than they probably could otherwise. I'm originally from the UK, probably tell by my accent. Been in Australia just over 8 years and started out almost as soon as I arrived in Australia, actually. I have a bit of an unusual background. I didn't come from PR in the UK. I was in the British military and I was working on a project that involved PR and marketing, and I worked alongside some civilian marketers and a publicity company, and realised I actually quite enjoyed it and was quite intrigued by this whole concept of marketing because it's not something you tend to come across in the military, and I was in the Navy, so I was at sea. And realised I was quite good at it, worked quite closely with the civilian teams. And when I came over to Australia, I thought, I didn't think I was going to do it. I just had a second baby and was going to take a bit of maternity leave. Didn't quite work out like that. I came across a local retailer and she wanted some help with marketing, and so I just fell in naturally doing some PR for her, doing some content marketing. Partnerships was another big thing for me, and collaborations and word of mouth, and all of a sudden I had a business.
Perfect. And the reason why I'm excited to talk to you is really that I think PR is such an undervalued resource or area for small businesses. Small business hasn't really thought about how they can leverage PR. And so I'm super excited to delve into that with you. But I'm super interested also to hear about your background and, what's led you to be where you are today. Tell us more about the British military. What was that like? How did you end up in the British military? Why did you decide to do that?
So going through school, I always wanted to join the military.
Yeah.
I'd got an uncle who was in the Navy, and growing up always admired him and pictures of him away on ships and that sort of thing. But didn't think I'd ever be able to join because I had a medical condition as a young child, and I thought that would prevent me. So I'd kind of put it off. So I just started doing things I enjoyed, and I actually became a PE teacher, an outdoor education instructor. Again, I was always into sport and outdoors, hence wanting to join the military. And then I started working up in Newcastle, and around the corner was a Royal Naval Reserve Unit and a Royal Marine Reserve Unit. And the temptation to join was too much. And so I thought, well, I'll go and see. And they let me in, so I became a reservist. And within about a year, one of the officers there said, "Have you ever thought about joining full time?" I was like, yes.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, let's do it." And at that time, I thought I was too old because there used to be an age limit to join as an officer. And I was just under the age limit, so he said, "We'll do it." And all of a sudden, I was in the Navy.
And if you don't mind me asking, I know it's not a question we should ask anyone, but how old were you when you joined the Army?
So I joined the Navy.
The Navy, sorry.
I was 24, I think, and the age limit was 25 at that time. It's since raised to about 30, I think.
Okay.
Still young, but...
Yeah, and so obviously through all of that training, that was probably a great experience for your business world, no doubt. And so then take us through again the exact, I guess, relationship to PR. You mentioned you were in the military, you did a little bit there and moved on.
Yeah, so as I was leaving the military, you transition out into Civvy Street. You do a resettlement program to help you into Civvy Street. And I realised that a lot of military people didn't know how to interact in Civvy Street. They didn't know how to write a CV that made sense, because the civilian world think we run around with guns or sit on ships, and they don't really understand what we do and how it's relevant and translatable to Civvy Street. So I actually started a recruitment company that helped military people to find civilian work, and also educated civilian companies on the benefits of employing somebody from the military, whichever service, whether it was Navy, Army or RAF. So I started doing that before I left the UK, and then I closed that down before I left. I met my husband in the military. He was in the British Navy too, and he got a transfer to the Australian Navy. Hence, I came across to Australia, and I then left the British military and came over here. And that's kind of how it came about.
Do you miss the Navy?
In a way, yes.
Yeah, I can see it. Like you're just your eyes open up and you're bright about the Navy. It's obviously a great time of your life.
Oh, it was a fantastic opportunity, and I was very lucky because it's a cliche, but I travelled the world. I did some really exciting jobs. I worked in operational theatres in Kosovo and Bosnia, worked alongside the army there and the SAS and the SBS.
Yeah.
I chased pirates in the Caribbean, which was a lot of fun, and just had a great time. And because you're on a ship with 200 other people, you build some fantastic friendships. You meet lots of people because you change role pretty much every 18 months to 2 years. And so it's your own, it's a way of life. It's not a job. Yeah. It's a real community of people. We have our own language. We have Jack Speak. So we even speak in a different way, which sometimes I forget, and I say words and people go, what does that mean? That's actually naval lingo. It's just a great community.
Say Jack Speak.
It's called Jack Speak.
Like Captain Jack.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that. How much of that experience do you think you take into your business life?
Heaps.
Yeah, okay.
A lot.
What exactly?
Obviously, as an officer, a lot of leadership and management.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone in business, even if you haven't got your own team, you're still leading not only yourself, but whether you're dealing with suppliers or you're outsourcing skills, you're still leading and managing people and situations. So that's crucial, I believe, in business. Obviously, very disciplined. I don't like to be late for things. Just the little things, getting out of bed and sitting down and getting on with it. I hear so many people who say, I work from home and I get distracted and I want to go and do this, that and the other. I don't. I have I'm going to work. And
the discipline, right?
Yeah, getting on with it. I'm not distracted by anything or don't have the urge to, just pop to the shops and that sort of thing. So I very much run my own diary, but I'm very disciplined with it. I think building relationships, again, was crucial. When you're in the military, you're working with people from all walks of life. Yeah. And, whether it's from some young kid at 16 who's joined up, or it's a very senior warrant officer who's been in the military for 30 odd years, you've got to interact and engage and motivate these people. And therefore, if you can do that in business and build those relationships and collaborate and work together, it helps enormously. And to be honest, my business was built off building relationships, because I was in a country where I knew nobody. I didn't have any family over here. I didn't have any friends over here. So I literally had to start from scratch and get to know people to be able to grow a business. And
so then take us into, I guess, a little bit deeper as to how, PR was the thing that you chose. I know you sort of briefly mentioned it before, but was it stemmed from the marketing, the social media piece? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I guess, so when I was in the military, I did a couple of projects, and one of them was a lot of internal and external communications. So we had to launch something very new to uniformed personnel. It was a huge change, and for some it wasn't well received. the British Navy is very traditional. Things have been that way for hundreds of years. And so we were about to change the way we, it sounds crazy, but fed people.
Right.
So normally we would feed people, we would have naval chefs, naval stewards, naval stores people. It would all be run by uniformed staff. And even shoreside, those chefs would cook your lunch and your dinner and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
We were about to change that and contract it out to a civilian company to come into our naval base and feed sailors. And they didn't want that. They felt we were taking away uniformed jobs. They wouldn't do as good a job because naval chefs are trained quite highly.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of resistance. And so I had to do a lot of sort of PR and communications around that, both within and outside, because there's a lot of ex-military people around naval bases who have got a very fixed view on how the Navy should be run. And so there was a big communications piece with that. And I guess I've always loved telling stories too. I love spotting ways to share something in a positive way, or to educate and inform. Just yesterday, I was talking to a journalist, and she said, "You've got a real nose for a story." I can just spot when something's worth sharing, and sharing it in a way that people want to listen to it.
Nice.
And so I started doing that. And when I came over here, like you said, the first small business I started working with, she'd never even considered PR. I said, "Have you ever been in your local paper?" "No." I said, "Well, you've got stories in what you're doing. Why don't we do that?" And so I started doing it for her, and we got 2 or 3 different story opportunities in the sort of year or so I was working with her, alongside some other marketing. And I just really enjoyed it. And I started collaborating with another publicist and worked with her. She didn't want to do the doing of PR.
Right.
So I was the sort of behind the scenes for her. And so I started doing PR. I love calling journalists up, pitching stories. A lot of people find it very nerve-wracking. I don't mind. I'm quite happy to pick up the phone and chat to somebody if I've got a good story.
Yeah.
And so I just started building relationships with the media and spotting stories. Sometimes I'd do it for free if I saw a charity, and I still do this, charities, local community groups, if they've got a great story, I'll say, "Do you want me to pitch it to the media?" And they go, "Oh, that would be great."
Yeah.
Yes, please. In fact, I've just pitched one yesterday, and it's about to run for my local rugby club.
Awesome.
So there's just so many stories out there, and I think businesses and individuals are missing an opportunity. It's a fantastic medium to share.
I think storytelling in general is a skill that is undervalued. Being able to tell a fantastic story is something that probably needs to be taught a little bit more at school.
Yeah,
more efficiently, because there are so many, not only just small businesses, but professionals that can't really find or identify the story to highlight in anything.
And that is one of the things people say to me, "But I haven't got any stories. Why would anyone be interested in what I'm doing?"
Yeah. It's funny.
Roll my eyes.
Yeah. It's funny when people ask me, why did I do marketing at university? I always say because I wanted to learn how to market myself better.
Interesting.
And I see PR being very, very similar.
Totally.
The study or the education of PR isn't necessarily just to get in the paper or to necessarily, provide a better image of yourself necessarily. It doesn't mean you have to be in PR or for your business, but I think it's definitely being able to position yourself in a certain light.
That's exactly right. PR is a lot about positioning, building that credibility and trust, and positioning yourself as the expert in whatever it is you do. And that's so important for that trust. And then ultimately that helps with your marketing. So it all kind of meshes together.
Yeah. And so how long have you been doing PR for now in Australia?
In Australia, about 7 years.
Great. And that's in your own business that you've been running the 7 years? And
Yeah.
sorry, what's the name of the business? It's Hullabaloo?
Hullabaloo PR.
Yes. Nice. How'd you come up with the name?
Oh, funny one. Because obviously PR is about making a noise. It's about shouting. And in England, the word hullabaloo is quite popular and well used. So when I first decided I wanted, because I was known as Little Black Book Marketing, when I was doing a lot more of sort of marketing, I suppose.
Yeah.
And PR was, people didn't even know I did it. And I thought, this is wrong. I need to rebrand, because the majority of my work is PR now. And that's what I love. And so, yeah, I came up with this word, and I had to ask lots of Aussies, look, do you understand what the word hullabaloo means? And I found that the sort of 30-plussers tended to understand the word, but it wasn't well known in the sort of younger generations. So I thought, no, I'm going to go with it. You know, Australia is very multicultural. There's people from all over the world. I'm hoping, and I remember my accountant saying, "Hello, what are you rebranding as?" I said, "Google it. It'll make sense to you."
I'll put my hand up and say I did not know what it was, and I've never heard of it before, but it's got a ring to it. Yeah. And I think if
you're making a hullabaloo, you're making a noise about something.
Yeah, you're making a noise. I like that. Now, how long have you been? So 7 years, and how big's the team now?
Good question. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And what would you say was the number one factor for success for you?
Systems and processes.
Okay.
I'm quite an organised person. Obviously, have to be organised in the military. I studied and trained and did some project management when I was in the military as well, and that transferred across. And I knew that if I was serious about running a business and I wanted to scale it and grow it, then I had to have systems around it. Because without that, you can't replicate things, you're going to waste so much time and energy. And if I wanted to outsource things, if I hadn't explained it and set a process in place, then how was I going to expect somebody else to follow anything or understand it? So I started as I meant to go on, and I always considered years down the line. And so that's probably my biggest tip to anyone when they ask. And that can be anything from your setting up your finances properly, which is crucial. Don't just have receipts chucked in a drawer and Excel spreadsheets all over the place. You know, set up your finances properly, separate your business expenses from your personal. Have everything documented that you're going to do in your business, even if it's the simplest of things. And I find that the businesses that do that and have the discipline to do that are far more successful and actually are easier to work with as well. You know, you can ask the simplest things, say, you know, can you send me through this, this and this? And the ones that are organised, straight away, share you a link. There you go, that's what you need. Others are scrabbling around or haven't even considered it.
Yeah, and doing it from day one is key, like you mentioned.
Day one, yeah.
Because if you want a business that's scalable, then you want to be able to repeat it over and over again.
You get too busy. All of a sudden, you know, within a few weeks or a few months, you're so busy doing everything in your business, you've got no time to set them up. And then when it comes to wanting to, you know, take on a VA or something, all of a sudden you've got to spend hours with that VA teaching them. Whereas if you just documented, even if it's just written down on a Word document, you can just give it to them and say, right, read this, have a go at it. If you can do it, shout. If there's something that doesn't make sense, come back to me and we'll run through it. That saved you hours.
Are there any systems that you utilise now, or are there any ideologies that you take on potentially from the Navy, and do you implement that with your team, and tell us more about what they might be?
Well, ideologies from the Navy, I think communication is huge. My team wasn't, but now is fully remote. I don't work face to face with any of them anymore. I used to, but they've all kind of moved away and things have changed. So communication is crucial, and that was in the military as well. And so I always look for ways to make sure I can connect with my team well and communicate what I need very well the first time, to again not waste time and frustrate people because you haven't taken the time to explain properly. So that's probably my biggest thing. In terms of tools, so I actually love Slack for that. So amongst my team, even for contractors, I invite them into Slack because email traffic is ridiculous. If you're emailing each other and there's 3 or 4 people on a group email, it just gets crazy. Yeah. And Slack can be so ordered. You can break it down into topics. You can talk to the people you need to. So I really like Slack.
Okay, nice. And do you use that as a project management tool or just as a communication tool?
Just as a communication tool.
Yeah.
Project management. So I've started using Basecamp. I've played around with a number of sort of CRM tools. I've used Insightly. I've used Trello. I've used Asana. I've used quite a few, and it changes as the business changes, really. And yeah, now Google Drive, Dropbox. So it really does depend. Sometimes a project will use one particular tool.
Right.
Internally, we tend to use Basecamp at the moment.
Okay, cool. And obviously being the PR specialist, what are some of the tips and I guess tricks that you would suggest, particularly for small to medium businesses to adopt? We've already mentioned that it's something that not a lot of businesses, I guess, give a lot of energy to. What are some of the things that you would suggest that you should absolutely focus on?
I'd say, first of all, brainstorm what your business is doing, your own backstory, the people in your business, the clients you've helped, the benefit you bring to whoever you work with or whatever your product is and what its solution is. Because within that are multiple stories. And even if the story isn't necessarily media worthy, it could be social media content, it could be blog worthy, it could be something that you want to share internally. So just consider all the areas of your business. I do a little mind map with clients and go through all the different areas that there's a story. And every business has a story. Some people say, well, I haven't got any. Yeah, you have. And generally your own backstory, the reason you're doing what you're doing tends to be a story. I've had my story shared lots of times, and like you, people are intrigued by, well, how did you go from the Navy to PR? And that becomes something people are interested in.
Yeah.
Other people have maybe overcome a huge challenge, or maybe they've had an illness which has led them into helping others with that similar illness. There's so many interesting stories. Only today I was contacted by a guy who's autistic, and he's now trying to raise awareness of autism and how it's hindered him through his life to be able to change people's view of autism in the workplace. So everyone's got a story.
Just about digging deeper to find what that story is.
Digging deeper, yeah. And sometimes it's something right back from childhood. But equally, there's stories in who you're helping. You know, if you've got a solution to something, like you're helping businesses, you could have a great turnaround story of a failing business that's turned around, and that's media worthy.
And so how often would you run through a sort of a mind map process with your clients?
So I do it right at the beginning when I first work with them, and I start identifying stories. And I can usually identify about 6 to 8 stories straight away. But those stories don't run out. And that's what I say to people. You'll constantly be generating new stories because of what you're doing and who you're helping. And as through the period, if they're working with me for a longer period of time, we'll constantly be checking in, and they'll say, oh, Susie, this has just happened. Is this media worthy? And we'll talk through it, and we'll say, yeah, that's a story. We'll add it to our list. Or if it's a time sensitive story, so like this rugby club, we spotted that the first ever girl in the rugby club has just played her 100th game.
Oh, wow.
That's a great media story. It's encouraging girls to play rugby. It's a milestone for the club. It's a milestone for her. And so I called my sports journalist contact at the Daily Telly, and she was like, yeah, perfect. I'd love to do a story on it. So it's those things develop, and they'll happen, and they'll keep happening in businesses. So it's an ongoing process. You don't find the stories and then stop.
Yeah.
You're always finding more.
And I think you sort of alluded to it previously, where you're either working in the business or on the business. And I almost feel like small businesses need to prioritize working on the business, of course, but PR needs to be added to that toolbox around what are the stories that you're working on. And I know that's something that, I've seen work in multiple different teams well around engaging with the team, the broader company, and saying, what are some good news stories that we've had this week? And not only is it good for team morale, but it's great to, present and market to not only prospective clients, but new clients.
Absolutely.
It's interesting on that point, actually. I'd heard the other day, and I wonder what your take is with PR for this. marketing, a lot of businesses view it as you market to prospective clients, most of the time. But I think there was like 4 or maybe even 5 people that you should be marketing to, and it could be very similar from a PR perspective. It's prospective clients, current employees, and future employees. How much do you think PR impacts that?
Crucial, yeah, 100%. PR is not just generating leads. As we said before, it's about positioning you as the expert. It's about building this brand. It's about educating. It's about, as you say, letting current clients know, or maybe past ones that you worked with 2-3 years ago, showing them that you're still evolving, you're still learning, you're still an expert in what you're doing. You've got something to offer, because they may come back to you 2 or 3 years later, and if you're not trying to target them, you've missed an opportunity. Yes, for employees and staff, because again, they want to feel a part of something. They want to belong, and feel that that company is worthy of their effort. And if that company never shares what they're doing or shows that they're proud of the team and what they've achieved, because ultimately your staff have helped you achieve what you're doing, then it's as if you've forgotten about them too. And yes, of course, attracting new talent, because if someone's browsing LinkedIn and you've shared this great feel-good story, they're going to look you up. They're going to say, oh,
Absolutely.
okay, I've never heard of them. And that's how they maybe come to work with you.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't matter what channel it is, what media channel.
No.
They could be reading the paper. They could be looking at social media. It could be your future employee. It could be your past client. It could be any of those things.
Yeah.
I'll take it one step further, though, because I'd heard those first 4, but I'm a big believer that it's even your suppliers, whether it's your current or your future suppliers, because I think if you position your brand in the right way, or your message or your story the right way, suppliers want to work with you.
Yes.
And
because again, it's trust.
Absolutely.
It's you're a viable business. You're doing great things, and also PR is, rightly or wrongly, people trust what they read in the media, in terms of they believe that if you've been interviewed on radio or you've been in the paper, then the journalists have trusted you, and therefore you must be trustworthy to have had that interview. And what it also does, that generally social media is not as good as, is people can connect with you and feel a connection with you quicker than they do on social media. You've probably listened to someone on the radio before, or listened to a podcast, and you thought, that really makes me feel good. I want to look up that person. I want to know more about that person. I feel I know them more than if someone had sent you a link to their website. It's just not the same connection. A bit like, a soap opera. You start to think you know the actors on the show. Of course you don't, but you're seeing them and you're hearing about them and how they're feeling. And that's what interviews tend to do. That's why I love radio personally as a medium. I think radio, again, is so overlooked, whether it's just local community radio or broader. I think radio is so powerful because people get a feel for you and get to know you.
So video isn't killing radio?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Nice.
They all have a place. I just have a soft spot for radio.
Yeah. Well, I think it's invaluable. I think every medium plays its part, and this is why I think you play a really big role in the business space, in the sense that providing the right strategy of how you convey that message through multiple different mediums is super important. I know through podcasting, plenty of people have heard our podcast, and I had someone come up to me the other day and he said, I feel like I know you.
Yeah,
You're like a second brother to me, because I've been listening to the podcast, and I know your experience, and I know all that sort of stuff. And it's funny because we may have never met in person, but when we do, there's that, I guess, affiliation or bond that they wouldn't have had previously.
You become more memorable. You kind of become known, so they know that this is your podcast and this is what you're doing, and this is your view on it, because everyone's different. But yeah, they think they know you. I've been stopped in the street, having been in my local paper, and they said, "Oh, I saw you, in the paper," and they loved. I can't even remember what the story was now, but they started asking me about it, and they feel confident enough to stop a complete stranger, really, to say. And in fact, I got stopped in the shops once, and they said, "Are you Susie Campbell?" I said, "Yes." They said, "I overheard you talking, and you're English, and you've got curly hair, and you're tall, and I'm pretty sure it's you." Said,
That's so good.
It's funny, yeah.
Well, the funniest thing, we were talking about this just earlier. I don't get stopped, but my dog Luna gets stopped. She's famous on Instagram, right? So we get stopped in the park, and it's like, "Oh, is this Luna?" I was like, "This is Luna."
This is Luna, yeah.
They don't care about me. It's fine.
And I'm Will.
Me. I'm Will, by the way. What I was going to say, though, is I'd love to see at some point, if anyone's got a report, send it through to us, because I'd love to know what the economic impact is of a great story on even suppliers, right? We talked about suppliers, but, people, particularly small business, they probably balk at the cost of marketing or the cost of PR or whatever that might be, but they don't look at the potential upside. And the potential upside of, potentially working with, a web developer or any other supplier who may actually be a little bit more, I guess, aggressive or provide a discount because they want to work with that brand, with that story. I'm not sure if you've got any experience in sort of that, in terms of numbers and stuff like that, but I think that would be super invaluable to see that result.
Yeah, it would, because I think I've done it myself, and I know I've done it myself, is if I'm reading a story about somebody and it does let on who they work with or maybe one of their suppliers or something like that, I look them up because I feel, well, they're obviously doing a good job for that company.
Yeah.
Equally, that company's doing well, so I want to see who do they surround themselves with, because that's the sort of circles I want to sort of connect with and align with. So yeah, I think an astute person would be intrigued by that, and there is a benefit in that. It's maybe just me, but I always look on people's websites and see who's built their website if I like it.
Yeah.
Photography, I want to know who's done their branding, because that's again useful. And even if I don't want it for myself, it's good contacts for me if I want to refer somebody and say, "Oh, just check this out because this is worth looking at." So yeah. Absolutely,
it's super easy to tell how a company is run by their branding. I'll put that out there, and not saying that it's a positive or a negative in all instances, but you can see how much effort people put in certain aspects, and whatever that story might be, you can definitely get a feel for them. Now, I'm interested to know, what do you think there are some current issues in today's business, world, and what do you think needs changing?
One of my big issues is businesses not educating and being informed about aspects of their business that potentially could be very damaging, and they go headlong into things. And whether that's headlong into a website build when they've not understood the implications of a good or a bad website build, or I still get clients who have no access to their website and hosting because they've given it all to the web developer, and then the web developer disappears or doesn't want to give it to them. And I just think, gosh, we're, in this day and age, have we not understood this yet, guys? So just silly little things like that had they spent the time and a bit of money to educate themselves first, would have saved so much time and money on all these mistakes and pitfalls. And there's so many. We talked about accounting software, invest in some decent accounting software rather than, doing a wrong BAS return and getting charged by the ATO because it's wrong or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
There's so many things, and it doesn't take much.
Look, I completely agree. I mean, I don't mean to bash SEO specialists here, but I think there is so much that you can learn on your own from an SEO perspective that doesn't need to be paid for, I guess. Yeah. There's so much organic education, particularly in today's world, that you can get access to, and then paid education to, be better at it organically.
Yes, or understand how to select the right person to do it for you.
Exactly.
But I guess that's something I learnt from the Navy. So I couldn't be an expert in all the disciplines that I looked after. That's why I had senior rates and other officers to help me. But I made sure I knew enough to be able to lead and manage that situation or that person. And I think the same is in business. Don't blindly say, oh, I've heard SEO is a good thing. Here's $2,000 a month. Go and do SEO for me, without any appreciation of how it works and how it should work for you and what's right for your business. That's dangerous in my view.
I think it's super dangerous because, we've gone through a process previously of looking at branding, looking at websites, looking at the whole lot. And there's a real big, I guess, discrepancy between providers as to not only what are they pricing or what are they quoting, but their levels of quality. And I think it's really scary for small businesses, particularly because they're investing in a provider with very little education.
Yes.
And can either get the wool pulled over their eyes, or, unfortunately, just make a really bad business decision and spend a lot of money for nothing. So I completely agree. I think education is super key.
They don't know what they don't know. And even in my industry, so if a new client or potential client comes to me and starts asking about PR, one of the first questions I'll ask them is, have you used a PR agency before? And do you understand what it is you want? And do you understand the differences in PR? Because even in my industry, PR is not the same from one agency to the next. You can get very different things. And what some people call PR is not what others. So I like to make sure they understand exactly, this is how I do it. It's not right or wrong.
Right.
But you may find that another agency will do it this way for you. So
what are the different things?
Well, one of the classics is businesses that have products come to me. And a lot of bigger agencies will tend to do product placement PR for them. And that simply means having their product positioned in magazines or generally magazines and print. But it could be part of, a Christmas gift guide and the top 10 face creams or something. So you're one of 10 face creams. You get a tiny little sentence. Here's the price, RRP, and a website link, and that's it. Now, to me, that's not the sort. I don't do product placement PR because I've done it before. I don't get a great return on it. I don't see the value in it quite often. And a lot of businesses say, no, we've tried it. And I've had businesses come to me and have had hundreds of product placements, and it's not made a scrap of difference to web traffic or sales or anything. And ultimately, when you've got a product, that's what they want. They want an ROI on doing all those product placements and getting something for it. So that's one of the classic mistakes people make. They think PR is the same. So I say, well, I wouldn't be doing product placement. I'd be finding stories in what you're doing. And they say, oh, there's no story. Yeah, there is a story. And I'll position you in a different way, or I'll get you interviews on radio, which they don't understand. Well, why would I go on the radio when I've got a product? But they don't understand how telling the story of the product or the founder or the creator or whatever has huge value, more than just a little tiny square in a glossy magazine saying buy my face cream because I'm in the top 10. So there's lots of ways of doing PR. The same as you can have PR done in what I call a big scattergun approach. And again, a lot of the big agencies tend to do that. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's a different way of doing it. And what they do is they pitch a story and they fire it out to as many outlets as they can, and the software that will do that for them, and news wires that will send it out. And they might get picked up here and there. Quite often you don't know you've been picked up, and it might just be some spammy news site that's picked it up. But there's no great value in that because your audience isn't there. They've just picked it up because they purely want content. Whereas I target each story to the outlets that I believe have the right audience, and so they're matched. Another big issue at the moment that I'm having a real battle educating people on is paid placements. You've probably seen it yourself, people saying, oh, I've been on Forbes or Yahoo Finance or something like that. It's paid placements. They haven't got editorial coverage. Yeah. They've got advertorial, or they've simply paid for advertising space. And you can tell because it has the sponsored of, it either says sponsored or at the bottom, and there's no journalist that's written that article. You've had to submit that article. It's not edited in any way. It's not even good quality.
Yeah.
And it's just been pushed up so that you can say, I've been in Forbes.
Which people use quite efficiently, effectively as well, on their website, saying you've been on Forbes.
And so you ask, what were you in Forbes for? Show me the article. They can't show you.
Because it no longer exists.
Because it never exists. Yeah. Forbes have affiliate sites, and they only show it, like, you could be showed to Outer Mongolia for 24 hours and say you've been in Forbes. Like, where's the value in that? And they spent thousands to do that paid placement. It's really frustrating.
Interesting. And what I'm hearing too is so much with product placement is, or a lot of that product placement, there isn't the, I guess, evident story behind it, as in you don't talk about the customer experience. You see the product there, okay, cool. It may be, who knows, a moisturizer, and it might make me look slightly younger or whatever. But you don't get the story behind, what is it about this moisturizer? What is it about the story of the founders behind it, or the team behind it, or the ingredients that they used, or the process they go through?
Exactly. There's no relationship with that product. It's not going to drive you to go and seek that product out. And you'll probably just flip over it and think, I've never heard of that brand, and keep going. Unless you are in the market for one. But again, if you've got a choice of 10, how are you going to select from those 10? You're not going to buy 10 of those to try each one. So it's very difficult for a customer to make a buying decision based on seeing 10 products. Quite often they've had to send free product to the journalist to write it as a bit of an incentive. If the journalist then does a great write-up and has actually trialled it, then great, that's better. But just being in a gift guide of lots of other of your competitors is of no great value.
I like the way that you view it, because stories sell, so it's definitely the right way to look at it. Now, does that limit you to certain mediums like radio, like the newspaper, potentially like TV? Do you look at sort of things like influencer marketing? Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I do. And again, there's lots of pitfalls with influencer marketing, and I get approached a lot and asked about it. I have my views on influencer marketing, and I think in the same way, if I was researching a magazine or a podcast or something, I would research that influencer, and I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. And one influencer is not the same as another. So it's very much about making sure that whatever your product or service is aligns with that influencer first. And that's where people just are dazzled by the influence of that influencer, but don't think, is it right for my product or service? Do I believe in what they're doing, or do I just think it's a fast buck because they'll use my face cream and post a picture of it? But if they haven't got the right market, it's never going to work. So yeah, there's definitely a place for influencer marketing, but it takes research and time to make sure it's the right one.
Awesome. Okay, cool. And I guess, what would you say your vision is for the future? And this is for both, I guess, vision for your future in your business, but vision for the industry as well. How do you think things will change?
So vision for the industry, and I guess kind of my business, it's one and the same. I really want to educate small businesses and experts of the power of using PR and showing people that it's not this mystical thing. It's not out of their reach. It doesn't have to be, $6,000 a month to an agency. You can do it yourself, which is why I teach PR quite regularly as well. Because I think it's important that for a business starting out and trying to grow, you should be looking at these low cost and affordable ways to brand yourself and to get your voice out there. So I'd love to make PR one of the things that people do talk about straight away, as opposed to Facebook advertising or SEO. Sometimes I'll say, I'm a publicist, and they go, what do you do? They don't even know what a publicist does. And there's actually, surprisingly, very few of me in Australia. There's the big agencies, and there's a few individual freelancers, but there's not many people that work with, small to medium-sized businesses. There's not many people teaching it. There's not many people talking about it. And I'm not really sure why. I think it's, with what is it, 93% of businesses in Australia are small business. But I think they just see PR as something that only the big brands and the corporates are doing.
Yeah. And
overlook it.
Back to sort of similar to the current issue that you mentioned, with people pouring into things like SEO and marketing without the education, that makes it a little bit harder. And potentially it's because people put money into that thinking they're going to make $1.
Yes.
$1 in return. Whereas PR maybe doesn't always get that view, which is ironic because you totally could.
Yeah, and that is a big fear for a lot, and I understand that. It's one of the questions I get asked regularly is, but what's the return? And yes, there's more uncertainty, but if you see PR as more of a long game and not just, I'm going to boost a post and I'm going to get 5 leads or whatever. If you see it as building that brand, building relationships, positioning yourself. You're not going to position yourself overnight.
Yeah.
You've got to build that audience. And if you can commit to that in the same way as you'd probably commit to making sure your website was up to date through the years, you're not just going to leave your website out of date. PR is something you need to be consistent with, and quite often contributes to leads when you don't even realise it has, because it's not as easily measurable. You can't just look at get a little report at the end to say, oh, you've generated 3 sales from this article. It's not always that straightforward. There are ways, but it's not as easy. That's and I understand that's something people have to overcome, and that's why I say to people, well, try it. Do it once or twice and see how it works before you commit to doing it long term. And I've had great successes with clients who've done a local media story, and I always urge people, do your local media first.
Yeah.
I've had people get contacted by bookstores to stock their book. I've had people fill events. I had a guy raising money for a charity who was stuck at like 2,000 or 3,000 and raised 10,000 because he was on the front page of the local paper.
Yeah, right.
It can make a difference.
Yeah. So it can provide a return on investment.
Totally.
But often, like what you were saying, is some people look at the return as the be all and end all, which isn't always the right way to look at it.
Yeah, they're not looking at the long term and bigger picture of building a brand and reaching people you probably couldn't reach just with your website or your social media. That's the point of media. As I say, I still get people contact me and they'll say, I read your article in, because I write articles sometimes for business magazines, and they'll say, I read your article there, or so-and-so mentioned you because you did this, and gradually it infiltrates. But no, it's not going to happen overnight unless you've got an absolutely amazing story that goes viral.
And I think if we bring it back to sort of those 5 points that we mentioned earlier, that you're not just marketing for prospective clients, it's your current clients, future employees, current employees, and also your suppliers.
Yes.
So I think that's super invaluable. So you're effectively solving this solution, right? Your business is providing some education to small businesses to understand PR better, and that's your vision. You'll continue pushing into that for the future.
Yeah, totally. Because I, as I say, I think it's completely overlooked and undervalued. Yeah. So I try to educate as much as I can, whether that's through my blog or, I've got a Facebook group. I'll share tips on LinkedIn. I do teach media as well. I do a media challenge. I've taught at other people's events because they want to learn. So I think it's really important, and I want people to see that it's not difficult and scary. And just with a bit of knowledge, you can either have a go yourself, or have the confidence to approach an agency or someone like myself and say, this is what I want from PR, this is what I'd like to do, this is what I don't want, because you've understood the differences.
And making an educated purchase, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. This is probably a good segue into, I guess, a little plug for you and your business, and how can people find you on socials and everything else? So hullabaloopr.com.au is my website, which you can
find all my stuff. So I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on
I'd be worried if you weren't, Susie.
Facebook. I'm all over. So you can find me there. Or email susie@hullabaloo.pr.com.au.
Awesome.
Happy for people to find me wherever. I get messages from all over.
Awesome. Susie, thank you so much. I think there's been some awesome, words of wisdom around marketing and PR. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, that I think it's so undervalued by small businesses particularly. And I'm excited to see where you continue to take Hullabaloo. And I know we'll definitely be sort of working together and putting your name out there. So I appreciate today and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's been fun.
Socius, thank you for joining us today. Please hit the subscribe button if you've enjoyed this episode. And if you'd like to be part of the Socius community, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay in touch. Cheers.